Hello, I'm Silvija Seres, and I'm really happy to be talking to you on your digital conference. I'm really sorry that I'm not able to be in Iceland physically this time. It's my long term dream, actually, to come and visit. But this time we'll have to live with the digital solutions and digital channels. I'm Silvia Seres, as I mentioned, and I have worked quite a lot in the private sector. I used to work with research and I used to work with development of algorithms and sales of those algorithms, among other things, with Alta Vista in Silicon Valley in 1999, for those of you that can still remember that. But in the last 10 years, I have increased my involvement with different agencies in the public sector in Norway. And I'm really impressed and surprised even about the speed of change and the motivation for change that we can see in these traditional institutions and organizations and departments comprising our public sector. And so I'm here to tell you their story and maybe to paint a little bit broader picture, showing you why this pace of change, but also finding the direction for this change is an absolute necessity in these times. So I will start basically with a quote from David Bowie. You remember him, I'm sure. He was also an interesting thinker as well. And he says, the future belongs to those who can hear it coming. And the reason why I'm bringing in this quote is that I believe we are living in times that are extremely complex. It's a little bit like also Charles Dickens said, it was the best of times and the worst of times. And I think this intensity of the times we are living it corresponds to a mathematical systems model called non-linear dynamic systems. The world has gone from being a linear system that is quite predictable with a traditional probability and statistical methods where you can take some trends from the past and extrapolate them and find your path into the future, to a chaotic system with a set of under systems with very strong reinforcement mechanisms between each other. And basically, it's an unpredictable world we are living in. The only way to create good positions for the future that's coming very fast in our direction is to try to think scenarios and try to think about positive scenarios, but also negative scenarios that might be lethal to our country, our institution, or our individual situation. And then create strategies to deal with each of these scenarios. And that's what I mean when that's what I think, at least, when I hear this quote. As I said, the future belongs to those who can hear it coming. And so the first part of my presentation to you is an invitation to listen to this future. And the place where I'd like to start is actually Corona. So, in the last 2.5 years, we have been hit by the greatest global pandemics the world has ever seen. I remember the close date, the Black Friday, the Friday 13th of March 2020. I don't know when Iceland got closed, but I assume it was pretty close to middle of March 2020. And the first thing that I found very interesting is that in the world, we have had many, many global pandemics. We had the Spanish flu that turned out to be exactly the same DNA virus as the swine flu. From 1918, in the Spanish flu virus, more people died from that than in the fightings of the First World War. In 2009, so 90 years later, almost nobody died from the swine flu. Same virus, very different effect. Our immune system has saved the day. But it had 90 years. We had also other very, very dangerous pandemic situations like the HIV or the Ebola, much worse virus than the virus we experience now. But the virus didn't spread so fast, and the world wasn't such a dynamic system at the time. With Ebola, for example, the virus originated in wild animals in Africa, then transitioned to tame animals and then transitioned to people, but those people didn't move about so very much as they did from a Wuhan in China to the Milano Fashion Week, and from there explosion, right? So we move a lot, we interact much more, the world is faster, and this supports the spread of these 40 plus viruses that are still out there and that we still don't know how to deal with when they transition to humans. The question is, have we learned, and are we ready for the next one? Then the other thing that I'd like to say about these great global crises that I have on this slide is that we had social crises as well. The Great Depression of the 1929, we had security crises like the September 11th, the first global war on terror, and we had the finance crisis of 2008, 2009. All really bad, but all touching one sector at a time. What's fascinating about Corona is that it has so many dimensions. So instead of just being a health crisis, which we thought it was to begin with, and we thought the virus is similar to a flu virus, so how bad can this really be? It turned into a social crisis that hit many of the countries which are not so egalitarian and don't have such a good welfare system like for example Norway and Iceland, in a terrible way. Some numbers from the US show that in the 3 weeks after the close down of the US industry, but also society, there were more suicides, there was more domestic violence, there was more drug abuse, there was more alcohol abuse, and in general, more social extreme crisis than in the 3 years before put together. And it is because the crises in many countries have hit very unequally. So the richer part of the richer half of the societies in some of these countries have been able to work from home. The children were able to take education from home. They were able to protect themselves until the vaccine came, while the poorer half of the society simply had to go to work because without that they would lose their mortgage, or health insurance wasn't in place. They had to send their children to school so the kids could get a warm meal. So these people suffered unproportionally more than the upper classes in the society. And this will have social repercussions on availability of workers that we see now, on industrial recovery, and on financial recovery for many, many years to come. This has hit very globally. We didn't expect it to be as bad in some of the poorer but warmer countries, perhaps India, perhaps Brazil, and then we saw what happened. And we also see that some countries are taking much longer to come out of Corona than others. We see what's happening in China. Economically, it was a terrible couple of years. 2021 is the first year in many years where we went negative on global GDP, minus 3.1%, in a world that's used to go plus 2, 3, 4% every year. Those minus 3 something percent are very unevenly distributed. So China plus 1, US minus 1%, and Europe around minus 8. For many other parts of the world, we simply don't know, but we see that the crisis is going to be exacerbated by very uneven recovery as well. And then when it comes to security, we are all very aware of Ukraine now, to the point where we've almost forgotten Afghanistan and the incredibly botched extraction of international forces from the country, or Myanmar, Burma. But these things probably wouldn't have happened in this way had we not all been consumed by our own problems and our own recovery paths. So, a very complex and a very dynamic situation that is now spreading forward. So, we have inflation, we have the energy crisis, we have the food crisis, and more than anything, we have a huge crisis in available workforce, probably driving many of these other problems as well. So, what do we do and how do we go forward from here, given that the next few years are probably going to be two things, three things. First is probably very difficult, probably Hard times ahead that require directed and brave action, especially from the public sector. Number two, digital. Digitalization is not going away, and it's not something that can be stopped because at the moment we are tired or struck by problems. Silicon Valley and China digitalize in a extremely aggressive, impatient, ambitious manner. There is a land grab for data, and we have to decide if we're going to let them take all the land, or if we're going to claim some of this land for our nation and our own regulatory ability. And the third thing is sustainability, a super important mega trend that has become a force for good and a kind of a growth engine. So, where sustainability used to be a thing that you check off on your sustainability report as a company in a pretty automatic and not very thoughtful way, five of the 17 goals, now companies understand it's a necessity. Companies and public sector understand it's a necessity to attract employers, partners, customers, and investors. It has become a hygiene factor, and you really have to mean it. Otherwise, you're going to lose people and lose projects. So, in this world, driven by digital and driven by sustainable, already in April of 2020, Forbes tried to describe the new normal and the opportunities in this new normal. And I remember looking at this list and I was thinking, well, telemedicine, I don't really know. I like going to see my doctor. I was thinking, yeah, online shopping, IoT, I can see that. But digital events, as soon as Corona is over, we're going back to basics. But what happened really is that, again, in 2 weeks after the close down, Norway went from 15% video consultations with doctors to 85. So a complete reversal. And after Corona, I don't think we're going back to 15. I don't think we're going to stay at 85, but all of us have learned the advantages of being able to live your life hybrid. So in some cases, I will speak to my doctor by video, and it means I don't have to spend half a day. He will keep time. My kid doesn't get infected. So we have some advantages. In some other cases, I will actually want to go and see him because I'm not really sure what is wrong or we need to take some tests. Similarly, with digital events, I don't think we have to insist on everybody being in the same room at the same time. Being able to do things digitally like this means it can live longer and many more people can see it. It's more democratic. And the time we spend together, the time you are spending together on your conference, has to be used in an active way. So, a little um, reminder from me, please use your coffee breaks and your breakout sessions to meet new people, to create new projects, and to learn very new contextual local things from each other. I believe in learning from each other more than anything else. So digital events are not just, a bad video replacement of the traditional events. They are events that can be used in many more ways. And so it's understanding the value of hybrid in all the institutions, all the services that you're providing that should be one of the gifts of Corona. On my next slide, I have a similar list of predictions, but this time from McKinsey. So McKinsey focused very much on two things. They were saying, well, we are now in this tsunami, this hurricane of change, and let's stick to the change muscle. Let's not go back to being conservative and happy with the existing and the incumbent. How do we build on this energy after Corona? And the other thing they say, which is very relevant to you, is that the public sector is going to be at the heart of this change. You are the guys driving it. How do you drive it? By your ability to purchase in a very strategic manner. You set your demands, and by that, your direction when you order things and when you create new projects, when you create new funds. and when you create new regulation. So, one little example of that is the transparency law that is now valid both in Norway and in the European Union. I'm actually not sure what the situation is in Iceland, but in Norway, in July, we introduced this transparency law that requires companies of a certain size, which is not very great, to report on the way that they do business related to sustainability demands. And suddenly we have to make sure that all the suppliers we use are not using child labor, that they are producing things in an environmentally sustainable way, in a financially sustainable way, and that they are being governed the right way. When companies don't know how to report on this, but for example, this is a super interesting project by our Brønnøysund registry. So creating regulatory demands and then allowing the industry and the rest of the public sector to catch up and deliver on these demands is, I think, your best governance mechanism that you have. We have a wonderful guy in Norway called Torbjørn Eg Larsen. I'm a very big fan. He used to be the CTO of NAV, which is our welfare agency, um, comprising of many agencies that would be typically split in other countries. And he usually says in Norwegian, du må ha peiling for å kjøpe peiling. And in English, you have to have some skills in order to be able to buy skills. And I think you, as public sector representatives and leaders, have a very important knowledge and skills task where you have to know what you want to order so that you can be the demanding and constructive customer that you should be. So, again, a challenge in learning the necessary possibilities of digital technology. And now we are coming to the fourth industrial revolution and why we have to hurry in learning this stuff. So, my opening statement is that we live in a very dynamic, non-linear world, and it is also described sometimes as the VUCA world: volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. And in order to kind of argue a little bit around this, I just want to show you the little table I have on the right-hand side. As you might remember, I mentioned that I worked in Alta Vista in 1999. I don't know how many of you can remember that far back, but those of you that remember Alta Vista, and that's an age marker, should remember that that was the first wave of internet. And in 2000, many companies failed, many digital companies in Silicon Valley failed, and then Web 2 came, and we are now in our Web 3 wave. But one of the companies that I remember really well is Google. So I used to eat lunch with the first 16 employees of Google, and we used to laugh at each other. We didn't have a business model in Alta Vista, and they didn't have a business model in Google. If you look at my list of the 5 most valuable companies worldwide, according to market cap in 2016, you can see that Google, through Alphabet, their mother company, is number 2 at about $550 billion. Apple is at $570 billion in 2016. 2017 summer, they are at $800 billion. In 2018, 2nd of August, I'm reading a notice in the newspapers that Apple has passed $1 trillion evaluation. $1 trillion valuation of a company is larger than the economy of most countries. So we are now in the world, and since then, by the way, it has grown to 3 trillion. And so has, for example, Microsoft, which on my slide here is at a low point. And you can say, how can they be at a low point when they are one of the most valuable companies in the world? But actually, at this stage, they still didn't do corporate cloud properly. And what they've done with Azure and corporate cloud has placed them at the most valuable company in the world. Again, past Apple, and Bill Gates has surpassed Jeff Bezos from Amazon as the richest man in the world. And it all sounds funny and like monopoly money, but the problem is that these companies, through their financial and strategic plans, are becoming the de facto regulators of the world. And this is where my worry about public sector is. I believe you have to understand what they're trying to achieve with their businesses. They don't have political motives, but in order to maximize their gains and thereby their dividends for their shareholders, they are spreading into public sector areas like health, like finance, like security, and like education. And if they offer these services more efficiently, in a more personal, in a more at home manner than you are, then they're going to outcompete you simply by being more attractive. And if they outcompete you by being more attractive, then how are you fulfilling your purpose? So, one of the most interesting trends I can see in Norway now, and I'm super proud of this country, is that I believe many public sector companies are challenging their traditional reading of their purpose. So, we all get these purpose declaration letters from different public owners of public institutions, and they define what we should do. But they are written in a language that is 10 years old, sometimes 100 years old, and they don't describe well enough the opportunities that each of these institutions has going forward. They are described in a very controlling language. And so institutions themselves are thinking, well, what's our real purpose and how do we fulfill it in a really ambitious manner? And I believe that Norway, in addition to the other Nordic countries, including yourselves, have a huge social advantage by having a public sector that is not only skillful, but also relatively rich and very ambitious on fulfilling their purpose. That's our democratic muscle, our, our real source of power. The thing that gives us, the values that we like to talk about: equality, community, trust, and openness. And so I think that by reading your purpose with new eyes and a new sense of urgency is something you have to do in order to continue providing this service at a national level in a nationally regulated way to your population. Very important for the health sector, very important for the education sector, but also very important for the finance sector. If you don't do this with your own banks or maybe with the Nordic banks, then maybe Apple Pay and Alipay will be defining too many rules of the trade going forward. So, sense of urgency, but also learning across many, many areas. And this is what brings me to the 12 Gutenberg moments all at once. So, many people think that this fourth industrial revolution, which I'll come to in a sec, is all about AI and big data. And to at the basis of it, yes, it's all about using data to create digital twins of anything in our world and then governing those digital twins, optimizing them, developing them, efficiency improving them to improve the physical thing. Think of a digital twin of a human body. That's how we will do medicine. Think of a digital twin of our skills. That's how we will do lifelong education. Or think of a digital twin of our financial behavior. That's how banks will optimize and sell more to us. Think of a digital twin of an oil platform, or a digital twin of a ship, or a digital twin of a city. And all of this is AI and big data. But AI and big data change everything. So genetics has become another disruptive technology at the moment because we now can do things we couldn't even dream of only 5 years ago. Similarly, energy systems and how they change smart cities or energy markets are disruptive at the moment. Huge opportunity, but also huge danger for those that are not tracking this. And again, the interconnectedness of all of this is a super important point because now that we can create energy through wind, through sun, through waves, through tidal, through many other renewable models, water not least, or thermic, like you might be doing, in combination with traditional sources like LNG, like other kinds of gas, like hydrogen, like together with batteries, together with dynamic pricing and dynamic markets, together with new infrastructure for delivery, together with new ways of building, together with new infrastructure for cities, together with many other things, are combining to create all these opportunities. And the question is not whether we like it or not, but which opportunities are most relevant to us and which opportunities we would want to work with given our cultural heritage and our values. So, a few words just about this combination of technologies. So, I speak often with companies, and very often they say, well, we do digitalization. We've been doing digitalization a long, long time, and we know how to do it. I believe that they do digitalization in one of the three buckets that you can see on my slide. So imagine three buckets and imagine making cocktails of the 12 Gutenberg moments from the previous slide in these buckets. And it doesn't matter if you don't remember what those 12 Gutenberg moments are, because it could be anything. It could be 3D printing combined with new materials technology, combined with AI, combined with CAD systems, combined with energy systems, combined with drones, combined with VR. So just about any technology and any industry seeing disruption. And the point is, how do you choose a few of those and make your cocktails first in the efficiency bucket? So do the same thing you do today, but better, faster, cheaper, safer. That's where many corporate CEOs stop. The second bucket of digital transformation of our societies and industries is do new things. This is what Silicon Valley does really well. Think of Uber, think of Airbnb, think of Spotify, think of Klarna. We have examples in the Nordics as well. We just need to celebrate them a bit more. And the third bucket is all about sustainability. This is what China does really well. We could discuss social credits and what they do to the society, but the point is all the technology and all the data can really help us improve sustainability across E, S, and G. We have gone from 17 SDGs, Sustainability Development Goals, to 17 ESGs, Environment, Society, Governance. So how can you use all the technologies that I mentioned on the previous slide to really improve either your environment, and that could be carbon capture, energy production, uh, plastic in the oceans, clean waters, natural diversity, or you can think about society. So how do you ensure a vital and viable society going forward? Least possible polarization, best possible lifelong education, etc. Or it could be governance. So how do you ensure that you have a safe and sound economy and govern it by regulation that promotes innovation rather than restrict innovation? And this is where we could go on a long, long track discussing how do you regulate data management? Are we being too restrictive? Are you stopping your public safety organizations like the police, like the Secret Service, like whoever's making sure Icelanders are safe in the way that they use information, as opposed to many people outside of Iceland that have access to all kinds of information about all of us. And we are happier to share our information with them than with our own public sector, etc. So remember, it's not just about efficiency, it's new services, and it is sustainability. The fourth industrial revolution, which I barely mentioned, but I really want you to keep as a background context or a scene for what's going on now, is not the first time the world is changed by technology that changes the way we produce, that then changes politics and economics. It's the fourth. So first time the world was changed by steam, and the way steam helped us made mechanized production. And remember the political change this caused. Basically, Karl Marx sat down and wrote Das Kapital. Why? Because he saw that the people who have the biggest machines suddenly outcompeted the people who had the most hands or the most horses or the most swords. Basically, capitalism replaced feudalism to a large extent thanks to steam engine. It also globalized the world, and it also created completely new weapons. It completely created completely new modes of transportation, etc. And so one point here to remember is that technology, including digital technology and blockchain and all the other things we could talk about, is never just good or bad. Remember, the same thing that allows us to make x-rays of our bodies is the thing that drives the atomic bomb, right? So technology is neutral. It's how you use it that gives its color, right? So the first industrial revolution, steam, mechanization. The second industrial revolution, electricity and mass production, assembly line. Third industrial revolution, IT and electronics and automation. And my challenge to companies often is that we are stuck in the third industrial revolution. If you have started implementing lean, if you have started automating, if you have started thinking new kind of matrix like organizations, etc., all the Toyota stuff, well done, but you're in the third industrial revolution. Very few of us have started thinking, well, what does the fourth industrial revolution change? And we call it cyber physical systems revolution. Cyber, cybernetics, control theory applied to the physical, biological, financial, political worlds we live in. Just one little example, think of Cambridge Analytica. They created digital models of our psychological preferences, and they used them to model us so that they could use targeted political advertising towards us. It worked for Brexit, worked for Trump, right? So I believe that the model of a digital twin is a really good way of thinking of the fourth industrial revolution. 3 points I'd like you to remember about the fourth industrial revolution. The first one is it's exponential. Exponential refers to a mathematical function of the form 2 to the power of x or 5 to the power of x, something to the power of x. And the reason why we have 2 to the power of x, relevant to the fourth industrial revolution, is that the chips in computers have doubled their production capacity relative to size or cost every 1.5 years since 1970. It gives us this kind of growth, and this is where the world becomes a dynamic chaos system. We are used to linear growth, 2, 3, 4, 5% per year, but the world is now growing like this, driven by the growth in computational power, availability of data, and network effects. The second thing that is worth remembering is the polarization. Before, markets were driven by Adam Smith's invisible hand, and it created a normal distribution in all markets, which gave us good competition. Now, winner takes all, and we have a few big mega monopolies with immense amounts of data, but also a long track record in algorithms that are using this data. And this is where things get really choppy. And the third point I'd like to mention is that it's not just about platform economy and AI on that. I think that if we listen to Silicon Valley or China, we believe that the whole world is just going to be driven by big platforms. But I want to show you this thing called the smile curve because I believe it's relevant for Iceland just as it's relevant for Norway. So if you think of a value chain, people start producing something with R&D, then they assemble components, assemble the whole product, they sell it, and then they market it and the after sales services. And you ask yourself a question, how are these services distributed across, or how is value capture distributed across this value chain? Who gets away with most of the value creation here? What you see is this smile curve. It's a smile. It has always been most valuable to be at the ends of the value chain, closest to the raw materials or closest to the customers. But now the value chain or the smile has become very, very deep. So the closer to the customer and the more capture you have of the natural resources and technologies to govern them, the better. So if you think of your iPhone, Foxconn makes it in China, really bad payment to all employees, etc., because it's a commodity. We can move to Vietnam, we can automate that part. Platform, closest to the customer, Apple. Design and sell. Capture a huge part of the value creation, 30%. A great position. But there is another great position, and it's the guys that create the camera, the battery, the antenna, the whatever is really, really difficult to make in that phone, and they capture a really big proportion of that value. So you can ask your industry and your direction, where can we be a platform, or where can we be exceptionally good at these enabling technologies that only Icelanders can do in a unique way? We use these two things to create digital twins as a model for the fourth industrial revolution. We have to think about new opportunities. People usually say it's too late to catch up, but a great time to leapfrog. So, where is Iceland leapfrogging? I know that you're great at several digital services, and I know that you're great at cybersecurity. I know that you're great at fintech. I know that you've done some really interesting stuff in health, especially the kind of DNA related genetics and computation. And how do you build on that? How do you build on your traditional strengths? I'm going to close by giving you a few examples from Norway. So, one example I want to mention briefly is something called altin.no. So, it started with the people from Brønnøysund Registrene, our registry of all companies in Norway, that started digitalizing and making uh, the public administration of companies more and more streamlined. In order to do this, they had to collaborate really closely with the financial um, powers in Norway, so Ministry of Finance, but also tax authorities, also the banks, etc. And the way that they managed to put together this collaboration is what I think is amazing with Altin. And I believe that Norway has one of the best public sector financial services in the world. We can all submit our taxes really easily. We can register our companies. We can administrate ourselves, our companies, and anything we need to do related to really important public sector services in one way or the other touch Altin or Brønnøysund. A really impressive example of collaboration and impatient digitalization. I visited Brønnøysund in June, and I heard a lot about their blockchain initiative. So they're moving into new kinds of projects where they want to enable more and more of the smart contracts capabilities of blockchain to be used by companies and by people in Norway. And I think it's when the public sector takes these opportunities and applies them to the unique data that they have that we can really start thinking about how we are outcompeting Silicon Valley. The other example I want to give you is digital schools in Norway. I have 4 kids, all in primary school, and I was super impressed by the way that Norway has actually managed to go through Corona. So, Friday 13th, my kids are alone at home for the first day since the close down. Nothing really works. There are hiccups on the network, there are hiccups on the access to all the content because it's basically overloaded. By Monday, each of them sits with their own iPad, which they've had for a couple of years, and has both individual teaching and group work and alone work in a way that impressed me. This wouldn't have happened if our municipalities and people who regulate education didn't say we have to do this. We can't wait for 10 years and research to tell us what's good, what's not. Let's experiment and figure out what's the right digital pedagogics, the digital didactics, the digital teaching method that fits our content, our kids, our teachers, and our parents. I think they've done an amazing job and I'm really impressed. Then I want to give you a very brief example from our defense sector. A few years ago, they decided they need a new digital platform. And I think a data platform has to be defined in a central manner and in a way that I think, the opposite example we have in Norway is perhaps the health sector. Too many regions are now making their own health data infrastructure. And it means that, everybody is trying to figure out from scratch. What does it mean? How do we give role-based access? How do, GPs versus specialist doctors versus patients versus families versus public institutions get access to this data in a safe and a democratically agreed manner? The defense sector has the same problem. You have many layers of security and authorization. You have people from NATO, people from Norway, people from Europe, people, So how do you make data drive our digital defense forward rather than limit it? And they have done a contest, a beauty contest, really. They were asking for ideas. So how do we build the next generation digital platform for our sector? And the nice thing about this is that it wasn't just the usual suspects that submitted a project proposal with a really well explained set of principles. They really focused on making this understandable and attractive. But actually, there were 4 finalists, and all with excellent ideas and from very different parts of industries and the country. And after listening to these projects, the defense sector was able to then make their own project description and then in a much better way go and look for partners to develop it. Maybe the last thing I want to say is we are working with companies that are creating virtual courts. We are working with companies that are helping both public sector and private sector report on sustainability. We are working with many companies. The Ministry of Environment in Norway has also done really, truly amazing things with, digitally driven everything from, surveillance of endangered species, illegal imports, to surveillance of the DNAs found in wastewater to see if there are any invasive species that have appeared lately, to digital hunting permissions that allow many other additional services. So from one institution to the other, we see that both the employees, but the management as well, are saying, how can we do things differently given the opportunities of digital and sustainable? And so I hope you will do the same. My family has this motto saying, care, dare, deliver. And I believe it's a good motto for many other places as well. So I hope you care. I hope you dare. I hope you build and keep the advantage you have with your unique location, with your unique culture, with your unique set of skills. And then I believe that we need to think very proactively about our joint future of work. We are going into a hybrid work-life situation, and we need to think completely new and revolutionize the way that we work with lifelong learning. I think you should learn from Norway. I think Norway should learn from you. I think you should learn from each other. And I think internally in each organization, you should learn from the most ambitious and impatient people that you have. I hope you make space for them. I like these people because I like this quote as well. It says that while the technology optimist, the technology pessimist, and the technology realist were fighting about, whether the wine glass is half full or half empty, I drank it up. Greetings from the technology opportunist. So please be technology opportunist. It's there to serve you. You are not supposed to serve technology. It's there to serve you and serve Iceland and exploit the opportunities that are created. I have written actually about the public sector and its use of data and the opportunities created by the Fourth Industrial Revolution in a book called Staten og Datan, but unfortunately it's only in Norwegian. And I think I will basically stop there. I'm just trying to think if I've given you all the examples I really wanted to give. I think the there are examples also in energy sector of Norway, where we are transitioning some of the unique skills and unique experiences we have in oil and gas into other forms of energy, and we are regulating things very, very quickly around this. Another example that I think also is interesting is autonomous cars were regulated by our one of the previous ministers of transportation that created the possibility to create completely new laws in 6 months to permit these autonomous public transports in a particular town. He used the principle of sandbox. So he said, within this geography, within this time frame, within these conditions, we are going to allow these autonomous cars. Figure out what needs to be done so this is legal in Norway. And then the ministry did it. And then we have experimented with this and actually come quite far to be able to help all the public transportation companies in our major areas to work very proactively and explore the future of transport, which is electric and autonomous and connected, of course. So my invitation to you, if you're a regulator, please create regulation that supports innovation rather than to limit it. If you are leaders, please find ways to collaborate rather than to kind of individually discover the new opportunities. And if you are employees, please challenge your leadership and think about what's your real renewed purpose in this incredibly interesting time, which, yes, has huge challenges, but also huge opportunities. Thank you so very much for listening to me and enjoy the rest of your conference.